So, welcome to this, for me, very exciting um, first ever live stream with a real viewer. And let me introduce him. His name is Alpha, and we're not going to share certain private details to maintain confidentiality. It's especially very important to do that. But what I can tell you is that he is on the East Coast of the USA. So, Alpha, say hello to anybody watching
Hi.
right now. Excellent.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, and I think we can hear you too through this microphone that you see on the screen and the speakers.
Right.
Right. So let me give everyone a little bit of a background. Alpha is a senior level professional in a global organization that everybody is familiar with, and his challenge is that he has reached the currently the top or the peak of where he can go right now in terms of advancement, development, and growth in his current organizations. Is that correct?
That's exactly the case.
Excellent. And so now the goal is to see if we can make professionally a lateral move, a move maybe sideways, which can help us to make that jump in terms of growth and development. And that is his goal, his professional goal in the short term. And of course, the long term, to continue growing and moving upwards and developing and contributing to society. And so the goal for today's live stream coaching is to create new ideas, to share ideas, and to maybe create new perspectives so that they can help us see a situation from a different point of view, because then we can take different types of actions. So that's the goal for this live coaching session. And of course, Alpha, if you have any other goals, now these are very general goals, but if you have any other goals, of course, please do share them, because this is for you. And the two things we're going to focus on primarily, we can look at other things as well, include reviewing some ideas regarding the resume, which I have already reviewed, in comparison to the job advertisement, and then maybe talk a little bit about building confidence when it comes to participating in a job interview. So these are the two things that we're going to focus on, but we can do a lot more if time permits, and of course interest as well. So what do you think, Alpha? Should we maybe start at the beginning with your resume?
Yeah, thank you very much, Franz, for giving me the opportunity to be in this live streaming today with you and to benefit from your amazing experience in terms of coaching.
Thank you.
And I really appreciate that. And I can't wait to start. And of course, I agree with you to start with the resume. So, like I said before, I'm a French speaker. I'm not a native English speaker. So, guys, there and try to understand my very French accent. But I'm going to give the best shot that I can to answer all the questions in English.
Excellent. And you're doing great. Right. So one of the things that I have been doing for a very long time is working with people who have English as another language. English is not their native language. And you know, some of you, if you were my students, you already know this. My native language is also not English. So I understand how you might be feeling in terms of feeling nervous in certain situations where you do need to speak in English professionally. And so I think you started with an interesting concept, and that is the confidence issue. And it's not a lack of confidence because you have a lack of competency, because I haven't mentioned this, I think Alpha has a lot more years of professional experience, a lot more than 15. He's He's very experienced, very professional, and like I mentioned, in a very well-known organization. So that's not the issue. He has the confidence when it comes to experience. I think it's maybe the communication in English that might be contributing to the loss of confidence. Now, I asked you this question before we started the live stream. When you think of your confidence, let's say going to a job interview in English, is that the stress, the lack of confidence, is it because you're excited or afraid?
I think the stress comes from the fact that I have to think in English and answer in English.
Right.
I think if the interview was in French, my reaction would be that it's not my native English, and I'm going to be asked questions by people who may have English as their main and native language. That creates the kind of stress and apprehension. I don't know how it's going to be before it starts. It's not fear. It's I'm kind of excited, but at the same time, I'm like, oh, what if I don't get the accent? What if I don't get the question? You know, and if it's a normal discussion, I will feel relaxed. But when the discussion is going to have an impact, then I'm not going to say fear, but the anxiety starts, because I know now this is not a simple discussion. This is a discussion on which I'm going to be visited, and then start the stress. And even if I know a word, I'm completely going to forget about that word.
Okay, interesting. I get a couple of different ideas here, and so I think one thing is what you're focused on. And of course, it's a very different conversation when you're being evaluated on what you say and how you say it. We feel very differently about that. The other thing that I sense from what you said is that perhaps you are focusing on the result, focusing on the outcome of this whole conversation. Would that be correct?
Yes, that's exactly the case.
Mm-hmm. So one thing, and I'll share with you my approach to this, and maybe it will be helpful to reframe your perspective. And that would be to see if you can answer these questions. What would happen if I don't get this position? What's the worst thing that could happen? And when you can answer that question, and whatever the answer is, if you come up with any strategy to be able to deal with that, for example, when I go to interviews, and I still do for different contracts and so on, I think, instead of focusing on what the outcome will be of this particular interview, my goal for this interview would be, what can I learn from it? And that reframed how I think about it. What can I learn from it? And when I took this mindset and focused on that, it took my focus off of the result. Now, you're currently employed, right?
Yes, I'm currently employed.
Yeah. And so if you don't get that position for which you are applying, will you still be able to be employed where you are right now?
Absolutely.
So in terms of contribution and financial and so on, you're fine, I think. So
I'm totally fine.
Yeah. So I think can you see if you can answer this question? Now, this doesn't have to be, a definitive answer, but what's the worst thing that could happen if you don't get this next position? How will that affect you?
Expectations,
Okay.
disappointment, personal disappointment. This is not going to have an impact on my current stature because I'm still continuing to work. I'm still going to be who I am. But on a personal point of view, I'm putting in doing this lateral move, and I think as career growth, it's going to be something very challenging for me. And even though this is not going to have a direct impact on me, but the simple fact that you just ask this question is now making me thinking like, okay, by the way, what is going to be the case if I'm not selected from this part? I'm going to learn for the future. And I think this is the first time that I'm seeing this other part of the interview.
Okay.
Over to you.
Thank you. So I'm seeing that, and I'm hearing that perhaps the worst things that would happen are more on the emotional side. You mentioned expectation, disappointment, those kinds of things. And I think that's very natural and very normal. But the good thing is that these things will pass. And I like what you said at the end. I think that it's a learning experience. And if you answer this question, what's the worst thing that could happen? And you could answer it, well, I can learn something about myself that I didn't know before. And I think that's actually a very good thing that can happen. Now, the bad part is that it might delay your career development, your career growth. But again, if you continue moving forward with what you learned from the experience, it's not actually that bad, I would think. However, there are some steps we can take to see if we can mitigate that, to increase our chances of success. So one thing that I've been thinking about, and I've been thinking about this on two levels: the strategic level, which is the higher level, and the tactical level, which are the specific actions we take and the things that we say at an actual interview. And if it's okay with you, I'm going to just briefly mention what I thought about the strategic level. And that is, confidence is a combination of being aware of things like the organization's needs and the organization's culture, which I'd like to get into a little bit later because I did a review of the job application. So confidence is a combination of awareness, and I think you're very aware of their needs and their culture, plus being prepared to be able to demonstrate value and fit to the organization. And again, I'll get into those two things, what I mean by value and fit, in just a moment. And then finally, so we have awareness, we have being prepared, and then the last part, and this helps me a lot, and I'll tell you why in just a moment, is physical and mental alignment. Physical and mental alignment. Because our body, the state in which it is in, influences our mind, and our mind influences our outcome. What does that mean? Well, I noticed for me, and I think it's similar to your situation, when I get very nervous, my native accent comes back. Now, that's okay. Some people say I already have an accent. That's fine. But it gets a lot stronger when I get nervous. And you had mentioned a moment ago that, one of your concerns is that your French accent might be a challenge. And as we are talking right now, it's absolutely not a challenge. So one of the things that we can do before...
But
yes.
the why it's not a challenge, because I'm talking to you.
Ah. And okay, and really, what's the worst thing that can happen? I'm not evaluating you, right?
Yeah.
So let me share with you, and this is more of a tactic. So I just mentioned the three things that I think are very important. Oh, I see. And can you see in the chat we have Natalia and Felipe? Actually, Felipe was one of my students, and I think he's in Brazil right now. He's back in Brazil. So
Hi, Felipe.
yeah. So one of the things, and Felipe might actually remember this. There is a particular. Are you familiar, Alpha, with TED Talks?
With what? Yes.
TED
Yes,
Talks.
I know TED Talks.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you have seen this one, but to me, it's one of the most important TED Talks I have ever seen. And I have shown it. Oh, look, Natalia is also from Brazil. I have shown this TED Talk to many, many of my students. And I say to them, you know what? If you don't have time to watch this complete TED Talk, watch at least the last 5 minutes. And this TED Talk, I will see if I can put a link when we finish this conversation below the video. This TED Talk is by a lady. She's a doctor of, I think, psychology. Her name is Amy Cuddy. Have you heard of her, Alpha?
No.
I think
not at all.
she's from the New York area. And she did a TED Talk titled Fake It Till You Make It. Now, after looking at your resume, you've already made it, but that's not the focus here. The focus is about confidence. And there's something really easy you can do, and anybody can do this before a job interview, before a presentation, especially when you're concerned about how you speak. I really recommend that you take a moment to watch the Amy Cuddy video entitled Fake It Till You Make It. You can Google it. It'll come up right away. I recommend the TED version because the YouTube version is shortened. But again, like I said, I'll post a link to that, and you can remember it. Oh, Felipe says yes, that's right. Fake it until you become it. Absolutely. And that video is related to the comment I made that our body, our physiology, affects our mind, which includes emotions and nervousness and confidence, which affect our outcome. It's a beautiful resource, and it's free. It's amazing. So I strongly recommend that. So this video, the TED Talk, is more of a tactical help, and there are a couple of other tactical things that you can do during an interview to help you regain your confidence. And one of those things that I do as well, and I especially recommend this to all my international students, is it's okay. And again, this is cultural too, because people from Japan have no problem doing this. People from North America often have a problem with this, and that is to pause. When faced with a difficult question, and there are many difficult job interview questions, sometimes they're unexpected. And the reason we get nervous, or we can even say we get stumped, is because we haven't thought about this. For example, recently I saw a job interview question such as, when was the last time one of your colleagues had a personal issue and you were able to interact with that person? I mean, when I think back, now for me as an instructor, it might be a little bit easier to answer this, but somebody in finance, somebody in project management might find it more difficult to answer this type of a question, simply because we don't really pay attention to those types of situations. We don't focus on them, and then we don't remember them. And if somebody asks this question to us at an interview, we don't know how to answer it. So one of the things I do, and I recommend for people to do, is to take a moment and say to the interviewer, that's an interesting question. Can I take a moment to think about that? You're buying yourself some time. And it's completely fine to do that. And in senior level positions, such as the one you're applying for, where people have a high level of maturity, a high level of professionalism, it's completely okay and completely normal to ask them if you can take a moment to think about that, so that you can go through the catalog of experiences in your mind and see if you can find that type of a situation and talk about it. Does that make sense?
It makes sense completely, but and I really appreciate that. Today I was in a panel interview and I was the one asking questions. And one of the candidates, we asked the question and the person didn't have the answer. And she was really, really stuck. And I was like, oh my God. In this kind of situation, how do you react? And she really didn't address the question. She really didn't question. And she didn't ask to buy some time, you know. So what you are now explaining, I think I'm taking very good note of that, and I appreciate. So basically, what you are saying, it's okay to tell to the panel, thank you very much, very good questions. Let me think about the time when I had this case. And while you are saying this, you are thinking on the right examples that you could take and present and answer the question. That's correct.
Yeah, and you mentioned something very important too. And I saw this actually in one of the competencies in your job advertisement, and one of the competencies is related to communication. And some of these words really jumped out at me. These words include: the candidate listens, correctly interprets, asks questions to clarify. These are actually competencies that are mentioned in your job advertisement. So when you are in the interview and they ask you a difficult question and you say, that is a challenging question, can I take a moment to think about it? You are actually demonstrating the competency that they are looking for. Additionally, you can ask questions, which you just did, to clarify. You could say, can you be a little bit more specific, or would you be able to give me a little bit more detail in this question, or do what you did, paraphrase the question? Because when you do that, you're matching your actions, your communication to what they want in their competencies that they spelled out in the job advertisement. So you're actually being very strategic by using these tactics. And think to yourself, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to demonstrate this competency in my communication and my behavior. And as I'm saying this, I'm actually feeling more confident, even though I'm not applying for the job that you're applying. So I think it's very important to, as you're communicating with the panel or committee or the interviewer, to think about, oh, I did something right. I asked for clarification. I was professional. I asked for a moment to think about it. That's a good thing. And by internally saying to yourself, that's a good thing, you are building up your confidence. So I think what could happen, if you really reflect on what you say, if you're conscious of your answers, as the interview progresses, your confidence can increase to where, as you're coming to the end of the interview, you are confident and professional. And by the way, I don't know if you've been looking at my body language. When I say lack of confidence, you kind of get smaller. When I say I feel professional, I feel confident, you get bigger and you open. And that's what I meant at the beginning when I said confidence is a combination of being aware, being prepared, and having physical and mental alignment. So just by your posture, and again, if you watch the Amy Cuddy video, you will see confirmation and demonstration of this. Just by your posture, how you walk into the room, how you greet people. Well, I guess shaking hands right now is not happening, but how you greet people, whether it's confidently and professionally, can build your confidence from the moment you meet them. So posture, openness, having a straight posture can actually influence your mind, which can influence your outcome. So these are just a little bit of a psychological comment here, but absolutely going back to the competencies in the job advertisement, you can demonstrate them by asking these questions, permission to take a moment, asking for clarification, and that is helping you to buy time to think. And at the same time, it's demonstrating what they are looking for. It's like a double positive, you know? So I think that can really help you. And, it's okay to speak slower. We don't have to rush to answer questions. And in fact, when I deal with people professionally, one of the reasons I think a lot of people enjoy working with me, and I enjoy working with them, is because of empathy. And that is going back to confidence, awareness, being aware of the organization needs and the organizational culture. And when I looked at all the competencies, they're all people oriented. It's all about people. And from that, I kind of got, who they are really looking for is someone professional, educated, who has a democratic leadership style. And that brings me back to your resume. I think in many cases, you did a great job demonstrating that. You actually used those words and included them in your resume. And I think that's really important, because a large organization like that, I'm pretty sure they use an ATS, which is an applicant tracking system. Are you familiar with what that is?
Yeah. I know what it is. It's part of our ERP system.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think you've done a great job by including the keywords that they have in their job advertisement, by including them in your resume. And because then what you're doing is you're demonstrating value, and you can do that in the interview as well. And what I mean by value is you're saying or doing things that they need and want. So it's that match, that connection between those two things. Does that make sense so far? Do you have any comments or questions on what I've been talking about?
Maybe one clarification about the interview would probably be on video conference. So I'm gonna speak now slowly. The interview is going to be through video conference and probably through Zoom. Is there any specific advice compared to a physical interview where you interact directly, compared to this interview through Zoom or through Skype?
Right. So I think now, do you know if it's going to be a panel interview, a group interview, or just one-on-one?
It's going to be a group interview, and there will probably be 3 from the other side with me on the other side. So it's going to be like 4 or 5 persons on the call.
Right. And will you be able to see the other people?
Yeah, I will be able to see them, and they will also see me.
Okay. So I'm going to tell you this from my point of view. There is a small drawback, and the drawback is that it's a little bit more difficult to see the people's body language when you're interacting online. For example, you see me from here to here, but you don't see the rest of me. But what I mean by body language is, what are they doing? Are they twiddling their fingers on the table? Are they nervously moving their legs, which can demonstrate impatience? So those types of things are a little bit more challenging to see. However, there is a big benefit, I think, to a Zoom job interview, especially in your situation. And that is something that is both a benefit and sometimes a challenge, and that is technology, and especially bandwidth, internet, and so on. I would recommend speak slower, because then you can enunciate your words more clearly to make sure that the people on the other end can clearly hear you and understand you. So that's a good thing. And you can even say, I'm going to be speaking slower and more specifically to make sure that we can hear and understand each other clearly, because that can save us some time. And again, so if you're worried about it being in English, that's a great thing, because you can actually speak slower, and it's a benefit for the other people. You're showing value to the other people. You're showing empathy. There are often challenges with technology. We want to avoid them. So I'm going to speak more clearly and slower to make sure that we can communicate well. And again, by doing that, you're demonstrating some of the competencies that have been included in your job application. So that's my my opinion of that.
Okay. I have another question.
Sure.
So in my resume, there is a part where I post career highlights.
Yes.
In this career highlights, I provided the main and the relevant experiences that I had in my career relating to the job interview. In this highlight, I gave examples. I explained what was the example and what was the outcome of my action.
Yes.
In terms of percentage, in terms of using action verbs and so on and so forth. So those career highlights, if I'm asked a question to provide an example, is it a good idea to use them or to come up with new examples since they are already in my resume?
Okay, so the answer to that is, generally speaking, both are okay. Now, if you're taking something from your resume to answer their interview question, now is your opportunity to provide more detail. And I'm thinking about, again, I'm going back to the job advertisement, where it seems like a lot of the focus is on communication and people skills. I noticed words such as conscientious, pride in work, motivated by professional, not personal concerns. What this does is it paints a picture of the ideal person who is selfless, whose goal is not for personal gain, but for the greater good, the organizational gain. So in a resume, it's challenging to include all of these details without writing too much. And you can use these words and you can include more of an emotional content, because this is what they are looking for here as I look at the competencies, and more details. The key is the details. What was the situation? Describe it. Were people suffering? Was there a problem that people couldn't solve? How did they feel about that? How did you get an idea to solve it? What steps did you take? Did you form a team? Did you persuade somebody else to have your point of view? And if you did, how did you do that? So in an interview, it gives you a larger opportunity to provide more details and make it more like a story. People love stories. And when you say this is what was exactly like the accomplishment statements, that's the formula for your story. What happened? How did people feel about it? What steps did you take? What challenges did you have to overcome to get the result and what happened when the result was implemented. What were the benefits? Who benefited? What was the value? So to summarize my answer to your question is, yes, you can use an example from your resume and develop it more into a story. So think about it this way. In your resume, it's like a movie trailer, right? It's a very short statement to get somebody's attention, while your answer in an interview would be the full movie. Now, hopefully your answer is not an hour long or 2 hours, but it's just an analogy. So you can build upon that. Does that make sense?
It makes sense completely. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And since you brought us to your resume, I wanted to share with you something interesting, and maybe that will give you another perspective of your resume. Now, behind me, I'm going to see if that's going to be visible. I have a whiteboard. So I'm going to see if I can show you this example. Now, some people have seen this, is that, if your resume passes the applicant tracking system, it then gets reviewed, hopefully by a human. Before your resume goes to the hiring committee or the panel to have an interview, the person reviewing it must say, yes, you need to interview this person. The challenge with that person is that they review lots and lots of resumes, depending on how many applicants, of course, there are. And research has shown us where the recruiter or the initial reviewer of your resume, where they actually look. So what they did is they did eye tracking tests. And what they discovered, and this is Western, so this is for English speaking. Now, when we're thinking about maybe some Asian languages, Arabic, Middle Eastern, it could be a little different because the direction of the writing is different. But if you're applying in English, typically, can you see that kind of?
Yeah.
So if this is a page, imagine this is a page of your resume. The person evaluating your resume spends, and they measured it. Now, in your case, it might be a little different. They might spend a little bit more time because of the senior level of your position. But typically, they created a map of where the person's eye goes. And typically, they discovered that the eye travels here, then it goes here, and then it goes here. And so your most relevant information, think of it like a brochure. Your CV is like a brochure about you. It's a marketing tool. It's supposed to grab their attention. And this is where they focus the most first. If this grabs their attention, they will continue to read it. Now, they may or may not read your whole resume or CV, depending on how long it is. Typically, for a senior level professional, a CV, not a resume, a CV, which is what you have, should be no more than 3 pages. And I remember you had mentioned yours had something teen pages, more than 10, and you were able to reduce that significantly. But I'm wondering if you might be able to reduce it even a little bit more. And here are some thoughts that I had as I looked at your resume. Interestingly, when I was looking at the job advertisement, I noticed that from the whole job advertisement, they only had about 3 lines about your education. It was very short. And so I think maybe one thing you can do to maybe free up some of this space to put more relevant stuff that they are looking for, perhaps you can take your education section, which I saw was in the top corner, and maybe move it closer to the end of your resume or your CV, I'm sorry. This is just an idea because based on this research. So maybe some of your let me just bring up your resume up here again. Maybe some of your like your key accomplishments are absolutely important. And the other area I'm thinking, areas of expertise, I'm not sure you need this section. And the reason that I have this doubt is because your areas of expertise are really demonstrated in your your work experience section, detailed working experience. So the areas of expertise, you're already demonstrating them in your work experience section. And this is just a thought, something for you to consider. So the areas of expertise, as well as the education section, because I noticed your education, since it's right here, look at this. This is one of those areas that the recruiter will look at first, generally speaking. And then the question is the job advertisement really focused on the education as much? Now, to me, it just seems like it's an expectation. I mean, if you don't have this, you shouldn't be applying for this job, and you have more than enough to apply. So this is just something I've been thinking about. Same with your certifications. Okay. Yeah. Oh, certifications, languages, and on computer proficiency. I would almost think that all the information you have in the left margin is not really the most important information that they are looking for. And I thought this based on the content of the actual job advertisement. So perhaps it's worth reconsidering the location of this information, because then you would free up space to put more important information. Now, the other thing is that you have so much work experience, and significantly important work experience. Generally,
and this is the reduced version.
Yes. So what the purpose of my comments here is to see if I can give you some ideas of how you can condense your CV even more. That's why I'm sharing these thoughts with you. Now, keep in mind, everybody, that there is no one way to do this. There is no one way to do this. There are better ways, there are worse ways, but there is no one way, no perfect way to do this.
I wanted to suggest something or ask a question.
Mm-hmm.
Based on what you just explained, if I look at my first 3 working experience, so down in the CV, they are not really relevant. And I was wondering if I should really keep, because this experience are dating like 17 years ago. And I was wondering if is it relevant to take 1 page for this or not? While I could just put 1 line that from this year to this year I was doing this, and that's it without giving the breakdown.
Okay, so this is a very important question, and I'm glad that you asked it. How far back in time do you need to go? If you have a lot of years of working experience, and some of that experience is maybe less relevant to the position you're applying for, generally speaking, you don't need to go further back than 10 to 15 years. So now it's 2020. I would suggest that you don't need to go back further than, say, 2005 or 2010, unless the position is directly relevant to the position you're applying for. If not, don't even put it in your CV. Or if you feel uncomfortable removing it, don't include many details, maybe 1 or 2 bullet points at most. And I think that would help you to significantly reduce the length of your CV. Now, before we continue, I just want to make sure that we see the difference between a resume and a CV. A resume is much more like a brochure. A CV is more like a report card from school, if I can use that analogy. The CV includes more details than a resume. And I see that in your case, you have done that. So your document looks much more like a CV, which is a good thing because that's what they wanted. Uh, Another thing that might help you, and maybe you already did this, but one exercise that might be able to help you reduce the length of your CV is go through each bullet point one by one and compare it to the expectations or the needs communicated in the job advertisement. So say, you have this bullet point. Does it address any of the qualifications or needs in the job advertisement? Is there a match? If the answer is no, there is a high chance that you don't need to include this bullet point. So I'm not sure if you did this activity. Yes, it takes time, but I think the results are worth it.
I agree with you because if you look at the resume, the first 3 experiences are not really. I was junior. That was 25 years ago. Junior auditor, starting my professional career. But I think after the third experience, it becoming a bit more interesting. So whatever is before 2000 or before 2004 is not really relevant. And I was wondering if I should keep them or not.
Yeah.
But since we are talking about that, maybe before you come with your answer, is there a maximum or minimum number of page, ideally, when it comes to a resume that the studies will recommend? Like 1 page, 2 pages, 3?
Right. And again, excellent question that many people have too. So, what's the perfect length of a resume or a CV? And the answer is it depends. Let me tell you what it depends on. Number one, it depends on where you are in your career. So if you're just a new graduate, which you are not, you probably want to stick to 1 page resume, not CV. And for an experienced person, for a resume, typically 2 pages is maximum, is ideal. A CV is a little bit different. A CV, typically, if you're going to, if you're an experienced professional like you are, it's recommended to keep it at a maximum of 3 pages. That's the general guidelines. That now, keep in mind, that doesn't mean that if you have 4 pages, they're not going to read it. But typically, recruiters and other professionals seem to agree that 3 pages is ideal for a CV. If you're experienced, and if you're writing a resume, typically it would be 2 pages. So, but if you have a lot of varied experience and all of it is relevant to the position that you're applying for, I would say, if you're going into 3.5, 4 pages or so, that's not bad. But what I do recommend is, instead of saying, okay, I have 4, that's fine, go through the exercise of matching your accomplishment statements or whatever information you included to the job requirements and see if there is a connection. Does this provide value to what they're asking for? If the answer is no, there is a high chance that you don't need to include that detail. But yes, I would agree with you that as I look at your resume, I see that your experience, I think I agree with you. I think you said before 2000 and or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
before 2000 and or 2000, 2002, it's not really relevant.
yeah. So
And
I agree with
and
you.
and the other question, from 2004 to 2018, even though I served in several countries, it was the same function, the same job, the
Uh-huh.
same TOR, the same job description, but in several countries. So is it recommended to condense them and say that from 2004 to 2018, name the countries and summarize the experience instead of going country by country, which makes the CV very long.
Yes,
With this, I think I can gain like 1 page and a half.
I think that's an excellent comment that you made, and I completely agree with that. Actually, this is something I made a note of, but I'm glad you noticed it before I mentioned it. Absolutely, and you're right. As I look at your resume, I see the employer is the same. The country might be different, or the city, but the employer is the same. And like you mentioned, your achievements and what you did, there are a lot of similarities. So absolutely, absolutely. And I see, oh, even your position title is the same, like you said, as
Yeah,
well.
they are completely the same.
Yeah. So, absolutely, I agree with you. Is that list your, because recruiters or whoever first, the first human that looks at your resume, and again, this has been researched, focuses on two things. Number one is, what was your position, what was your title, and what was the company or organization. So those are the two most important things. And if you, if it actually makes it easier that you had the same job title. Start with the job title, and then put the name of the organization, and then simply list the countries, and next to the countries, list the corresponding dates. And you can even, so I don't know if this will be, maybe I'll just use my hands, it will be simpler. So the first line would be your position title. Underneath that would be the organization. And you can even summarize all of that with two dates, from to, completely, or from, and then if you're still working there, current or present, and then specify the details. And in a CV, you should do that. So, if you mention the USA, or countries in Africa, or countries in the Middle East, or countries in Europe, simply mention the country, just like you said, and then put the corresponding date. I think that's a brilliant idea. It's a great idea. And I agree with you. That would really help you to get to 3 pages on your CV.
Okay, got it.
Excellent. Anything else here that I wanted to comment on? Yeah, I noticed there was a little comment by another person in your CV. So, like I mentioned at first, it's a good exercise to review your content and then see if it matches the what the job advertisement is asking for. And then if it doesn't match, then you might be able to maybe provide less detail or remove it. And then another thing is just like that person mentioned, do the same exercise and see, am I repeating myself? Am I repeating the same accomplishments? Now, repeating keywords is useful to get through the applicant tracking system, but we also have to remember that it has to be easy to read for a human. We don't want to keep repeating it. So, is there repetition? And if there is there an opportunity to reduce the repetition as well? So that's another activity you can go through.
Okay.
And I think we don't want to cut too much because you have some very valuable experience, and we want to make sure. So going back to the difference between resume and CV, the CV has a lot more detail. And of course, whenever possible, numbers are like pictures. They represent 1,000 words. So whenever you can quantify results, that is always a very good thing to do.
Okay, so I'm going to rework the CV because I already moved from 14 pages to 4. I think that I can still. The issue when reviewing and reducing the CV is how to make the choice and the decision on which one of your experience is relevant. But what I'm now learning from what you just said, and I really appreciate that, is to take your CV the way it is, go through every bullet point, and validate the bullet point with the job description.
Absolutely.
If it's not relevant, then you take it out and park it somewhere for another job advertisement.
Absolutely.
But it is not relevant for this one. And I think by doing that, and I'm currently reviewing my CV, I think there are a couple of bullet points that I can remove there. The idea is not to show that I have this large experience, but it's to show what in my experience is relevant and what will serve them. Am I correct?
Absolutely. And I wish I could take what you said and put it on a poster in every classroom, in every university, in every college, because that's exactly it. And you can, it depends how you think. I like to organize my things, and you can even make a chart where you either created in Excel or Word or on a piece of paper. And I kind of did a rough draft of that as I was reviewing your job advertisement. And I was thinking, what are the personal characteristics that they are looking for? And like I mentioned before, I identified words like conscientious, proud of the work, motivated by the bigger picture. So I would add these to, applicant characteristics. Then I might say specific education. And then I might have another column which shows the technical skills or accomplishments. And I would look at my resume and just make little checks. This one, yeah, and see if you cover all of them. And when you go through this activity, it has an additional bonus that after you go through your resume or CV, comparing it to the chart, which has the criteria, you can then, after the exercise, you can look at the chart and say, oh, I missed something. I don't have, this skill or this criterion demonstrated in my CV or resume. And then you can see if you can come up with any information to communicate and make that match. So, and again, this depends on your personality. I have a sense that you are a very organized person, which is, again, something that they are looking for. Some people do it, various ways, just in their mind. But if you do create that document, it makes it easier for next time. And then you're building your capacity, you're building your resources. And I like the way you said it. You take that skill or you take that bullet point and you park it somewhere for a next job application. I think, and I've been doing this with students in the past, really what you're doing is you're creating an inventory of skills, experiences, and qualifications.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. Let's see here. Is there anything else you'd like to review or comment on or ask?
Well, just coming back to the interview, and I'm already using your technique, so I'm like very calm, very quiet, and I feel a bit more relaxed talking to you.
Excellent.
Because
And
I'm not
if I could
I'm
just
not
say,
talking very slowly,
I'm
and the
I'm
words
so
are
happy
coming
you're doing that.
easily. And the interview usually starts with, why do you think that you are one of the best possible candidates for this position? So this is the first part of my question. And the interview will always end with, do you have a question for the panel? And it's very difficult. What is the strategy? What is the technique and what advice when it comes to introducing yourself before getting into the interview? And then at the end of the interview, if you are asked for a question, is it okay not to ask a question? Are you obliged to ask a question? And what if your question is completely stupid? So
there are no stupid questions. But
so how will you address that?
Okay, so maybe I can start at the end this time. So yes, at the end of an interview, always ask, I would say, 2 questions. Always ask 2 questions. And I think I did make a video about this topic. I think you can find it in the job interview questions playlist, if I remember correctly. But typically, it's good to ask questions about things that you will not be able to learn by reading or reviewing the organization's website. So, for example, right now and for the past couple of months, we have had this whole pandemic situation. One of the questions that I'm thinking about is, what changes or how did the organization or department have to adapt to the current situation? And is there a long-term plan when things change? So you can ask something about change management. I think that could be very useful. Another question that you can ask that is really difficult, it's almost impossible to answer by looking at websites or even news articles, is to ask about culture, the organizational culture. Now, you can get a lot of ideas, and I did as I was looking at the job advertisement. And so let me give you a real example of what I would ask after having read the job advertisement. And what I looked at, again, the job competencies, and they are very much focused on. So let's pretend I'm being interviewed and I'm asking you a question. Let's pretend you're the interviewer. So I would say, thank you for the opportunity to provide my information and to show you how I am very well suited for this position. And I really thought about the competencies listed in the job advertisement. And I see that the organization pays attention to and prefers democratic leadership styles. A manager who's focused on people, a manager who listens, a manager who makes decisions carefully and intelligently. And I'm getting some ideas about what the working culture is, the interpersonal culture. Can you give me some more information about that to add to my thoughts or what I'm thinking right now? So asking open-ended questions that allow the person to provide their opinion, to provide a description, are often the best questions because they demonstrate that you are thinking critically. So by giving that introduction that I just did, I'm demonstrating to the panel that I've been really thinking and synthesizing, putting together the information provided in the job ad and I have a certain idea now, I have an opinion, and I would like to clarify that. I would like more information about that. So I'm using that question, I'm using the information from the job advertisement as a starting point for my question. So what I'm really doing is I'm matching the question that I'm asking to some of their requirements. I'm showing an interest in what they want. Really, to summarize that, your question becomes a valuable question because you're thinking about their expectations. Does that make sense?
It makes sense completely. And I really like the first part of it, the way you introduce it and the way you link it with the competency. But this being a question, is it also recommended to use the competencies to do the introduction and to present myself, link my experience with the competencies or not?
Absolutely. And again, I'm glad you said that because it shows that you're thinking in a very strategic way, and by carefully choosing what you ask and how you answer. And what I mean by that is by thinking about, is my question and is my answer to their questions in some way matching what the organization represents and what the qualifications that they are asking for, the competencies. So like we said earlier in our conversation, when you're asking the panel to clarify a question, when you're paraphrasing and saying, well, so I understand that what you are asking is this. Is my understanding correct? And then you're listening, you stop speaking and then listen to them. By doing this, you are actually demonstrating live the competencies that they are expecting. And that is strategic communication, is thinking about what I'm saying, does it match what they want? And again, that's empathy. And that's why, going back to a previous comment when you said, that's one of the reasons I think a Zoom interview, an online interview, could be beneficial. Because when we speak slower, we can think at the same time. When we're speaking really quickly, typically this stops working as quickly, the brain. So by slowing down how we speak, we allow ourselves time to think and review and consider what we are saying. And like we said before, it's okay to pause. A pause gives us an opportunity to think about what they said, what they asked, and what we will say next. It allows us the opportunity to actually answer the questions they are asking and not say whatever we want to say that's on the top of our mind. So yes, I'm in complete agreement with you. I think you can make the whole conversation very strategic, as we have been doing in this live stream. I'm using the job advertisement that you showed me, and I'm using your resume to lead the questions and the conversations. And our communication together is focused on what is in these documents that we're looking at. And that's a strategic conversation. Now, I'm going to make a little tangent because I just remembered something. You asked me, what are the differences between a live interview and an in-person interview? And this is something that is very different online. It's eye contact. So I have to, because we're live, I have to consciously remember that my camera is not on my screen. It's right here. So even though I'm looking at myself, when I look at myself, I'm not actually making eye contact with you. I have to look at the camera. And that's very different than looking at people's faces. And to me, that was the biggest challenge with online work and video work, because staring into a camera is much more difficult than just looking at your self-talk. So that's something that I still have to do consciously, is remind myself that you have to look at the camera and not at the screen to maintain eye contact.
Okay, got it. Thank you very much. I
You're
really
welcome.
appreciate this live session today.
And like I said, go to the on the YouTube channel KISS Communication, and for those who are watching, it's not KISS, it's Keep It Short, Simple, and Specific. But a live stream gives us an opportunity to expand on some details, but we still want to make them simple. Because it makes it easier to understand for everybody. So in the playlists, if you go to my YouTube channel, in the playlists you will see a job interview playlist, and I'm sure I did a video about the types of questions you can ask at the end of an interview. I think that might be a useful video. And then there was another, I don't think I answered the first thing you said. How do you start the interview?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. How do you start? How do you introduce yourself?
Right. So generally speaking, and this depends a little bit on the culture of the organization. Is the organization formal and professional, or are they a little bit more informal? I'm looking at the job advertisement, and to me it appears that this organization is very much professional and very much focused on people, communication, and democratic decision making. So there's a very big component on the soft skills, the communication, and people working well together, and respect, and so on. So to start the interview, or any interview, it's always good to develop rapport. Now, in some countries, small talk is expected. In other countries or cultures, small talk is not really used in a professional situation. But the way I like to start an interview, if I'm a candidate, is I like to make a comment, a thoughtful comment, about why I'm proud, happy, excited about being asked for an interview in this type of an organization. So it could be, and one of the things you can do is look at news stories about this organization. You could say something, I've been following the development of this initiative or this project for quite some time, and recently I noticed in the news that this organization did that. That makes me even more excited and more proud to be chosen to be interviewed here. It's really important for me to listen to others, to include others, because that's what makes an organization and not just a group of individuals. And you see, when I say something like this, I'm demonstrating that I've thought about, I'm being thoughtful. I'm considering something, and I'm not just saying something that is common knowledge. So building rapport doesn't mean you're becoming friends with the interviewers. It just means that you're establishing a common channel of communication. You're showing that you have something in common with the group of people who want to interview you. So, and that is very professional. In other areas, in other cases, in my experience, and this goes back to when I was in corporate sales, whenever I would visit a client, I would watch, I would perceive, I would see what is in that person's office. starting with the receptionist or the person who greets me, and I would make a comment about that. And you can learn a lot by how the place is designed or decorated or organized, and you can make a comment about that. And all of that, the purpose is to create rapport, which means you're creating a friendly and um, um, professional and confident atmosphere for a discussion. So that's what I would recommend. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
No further question from my side.
Excellent. So before we go, I just want to thank some of the people who posted in the chat. Thank you, Callie. Thank you, Alini. Thank you, Felipe, Natalia, for posting comments. Some of you I remember because you were my students. Others, welcome. And what I'd like to do moving forward with this channel is to do this type of a live stream coaching more often. Well, this is the first one, but I'd like to continue doing that in the future. So if you're watching this, whether you're watching live with us or you're watching this when it's been recorded, if you have a question that you would like to discuss on a live stream with me, you can find my contact information when you go to the About tab on the YouTube channel page. And if you scroll down after you go to the About tab, you will see my contact information, and you can send me a note and we can talk further about that. But going back to you, Alpha, thank you for being the first viewer to join me live. I actually really enjoyed this. And just like you, I was nervously excited at the beginning because I was worried about how the technology would work and so on. We're live. But I had a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. And I thank you, Alpha, for joining us with your professionalism, experience, and feedback and questions.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I really enjoy it. And of course, after the interview, I will be more than happy to come and share my experience from the interview.
That would be excellent. That would be excellent. Okay. So in that case, thank you, Alpha. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And until next time, whether it's a video or whether we're live, I hope you come back to join KISS Coaching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please make sure you do so that you get notifications of new announcements and new videos.